Absolute Power, Task Force 7, Issue 1, Leah Williams writing with Caitlin Yarsky on the art. So, I mean, I wasn't super excited about this, and I know Connor ended up not reading this. Absolute Power, Issue 1, very good. Excited for Issue 2. And to be honest, like in Issue 1, when Waller says, like, all right, test, send the Task Force 7 Amazos out to take out their targets, and I'm like, okay, this sounds repetitive. It sounds like each issue is going to be one Amazo robot going after a specific target. And this particular issue is the Superman-themed Amazo robot going after the Captain and Mary Marvel, which, so I started this, and I'm like, okay, I've not been in love with anything that I've read from Leah Williams. I've not been reading the ongoings typically because I haven't really loved her stuff, but we'll see how it goes. And I think for me, this ended up being okay, purely just because it ended up being so focused on the Marvels, and it had the T-Rex from the Mark Waid run in it, and some of the banter and like comedy from that stuff, that I ended up finding myself liking it more than I thought I would. But it does have this kind of asterisk on it where this is a tie-in that was probably very skippable. And it doesn't necessarily get me excited for any of the other tie-ins, especially since the other tie-ins, or specifically this mini-series of tie-ins of the Task Force 7 stuff, it's all going to be different creative teams. It's all going to be different characters. So there's nothing about this, even if this was terrible, it probably would put me in a bad mood for the rest of them, just because, okay, this is the quality they can be. But just because this wasn't too bad, it doesn't make me think that I'm going to like any of the other ones very much either. It's a tie-in, and it's always going to feel like that.
There's an expectation with them now at this point where it's just, they're all kind of, barring the odd exception here or there, they're all kind of just, they're fine.
Yeah. Waller has Amazo suck some energy from the Parasite, and then Parasite's like hunger for the energy kind of like lets them trace where the Marvels have went, which turns out to be the Rock of Eternity. But yeah, and this first part, I was like, oh, whatever. I wasn't feeling the art too much. It's very sort of flat and smooth and kind of house style in a bunch of ways. I think it stuck out especially because I just read issue 1 last week, and it was Amanda Waller, and I think this is the thing, because Amanda Waller's face is in all of these. It's very easy to compare the art styles, because you can just I can remember what her face looked like last week, so instantly I'm like, oh, she looks very flat in this versus the main book from Mora last week. But once it got
comparing most artists to Mora, though.
I mean, yeah, that is true. But once it got to the Rock of Eternity, though, and we get the T-Rex, the accountant, and he's just he's finished sorting all of the souvenirs, and he's got filing cabinets and all that, and Mary and Billy are trying to find an artifact to maybe help them fight without their powers, because if they use their powers, they'll be drained by the Amazos, so they're looking for an alternative. And a lot of this was just a comedy of them trying to sneak their artifact out, whilst the T-Rex finds them and says, oh, that's fine, you can take this out, you just have to file this stack of paperwork. And it was all just continuing those paperwork gags with the dinosaur from that run. So for the most part, I was amused by that. I was like, yeah, this is sort of playing into what that run was. If anything, it's interesting that Leah Williams ended up on this and not either Wade himself or Josie Campbell, who's been continuing that run. So, whatever, not a big deal. The Amazo shows up, though. They have a bit of a fight. He's going to kill Parasite after the fact. The poor T-Rex gets blasted by the Amazo as well. I'm assuming he's not dead. I'll be very upset if he is. But yeah, Black Adam shows up, though, which is the sort of the big swing of the issue, and starts fighting the Amazo. And yeah, just protecting the Rock of Eternity. He's not really there to protect the kids or anything like that, because he's Black Adam. You know the drill. But yeah, bit of a fight scene. But ultimately, Black Adam does suffer. He gets grabbed, and his energy starts getting sucked out of him, because that's what all these Amazos have been doing in Absolute Power. We'll see, obviously, more on that and how they can do that, I assume, in the main event at some point, but that was the big part of issue 1. So, yeah, I mean, that was pretty much it. They try fighting Amazo still. It kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger where Billy finally says Shazam, and it doesn't really give us what the conclusion to that is. But what we do see is Steve Trevor arriving in Gamora, where Amanda Waller has got all these people trapped. And would you believe it, we see Billy and Mary in some of the cells, as well as Black Adam. So it shows us that they did lose the fight. It was all kind of futile. We also see Power Girls in one of the cells. And Steve's actually narrating this part of the issue and basically says, Waller's calling him in, not because she thinks he's going to be useful or anything like that, but just because she knows he's got a relationship with Wonder Woman and she wants to keep an eye on him. So it's all very strategic. But the person waiting in the office when he's escorted there by the Amazo is Sergeant Steele, who now says, "You work for me now," and Steve defiantly in his narration says, "The hell I do," and that's the end of the issue. So it feels like beyond the fights, there might be these little snippets of just kind of establishing where some side characters are during this event, for where they might pop up in later parts of the story. Again, I don't think it's that big a deal. I think if Steve pops up in the main book and has a little narration box saying, "Oh, he was enlisted to work for Waller and Sergeant Steele," that'll be all you need. Like, there's not really much to it other than that. So it's not a bad tie-in issue. It's perfectly fine. It's just, there's nothing super exciting about it. The most fun I got out of it was just purely because it actually felt like it gave you some of that Captain Marvel comic stuff that I've been enjoying. Not as good as that comic and by any stretch of the imagination, but just give me a little bit of that vibe, which was nice to have. But I think these Task Force 7 tie-ins are going to be kind of case by case going forward. I don't think I feel like compelled to say I'm going to read all of them. I think it's going to come down to next week. It'll be, okay, do I feel like reading one more comic? Who's on it? What's the team? And, take it from there.
That's what I was going to say. Are they all written by different people?
I think so. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm assuming they are.
Easy to check, I suppose.
Check what issue 2 is next week.
John Layman with Max Raynor on art.
So, yeah. Although Max Raynor art doesn't sound like a bad time.
Jeremy Adams on the third one.
Okay, so, I might dip in and out of them, because obviously it's issue 1, 2, 3, but they're not really. I mean, maybe these bits at the end that are more tied to like what the Waller's like regime is doing, maybe they'll follow on from each other a bit more. But
I would say out of the 7, just flicking through, there's probably 4 or 5 teams I'm interested in.
I mean, that's not bad for 7.
It's not. I think it's a shame that it starts with, in my eyes, 2 of the weaker ones that would get me the least excited, and then it's the case of, for a lot of people, they'll try 1, they might try 2. If 3's then the one that you're going, oh, interesting, it might be a bit too late.
Maybe the hope is that the names that people care about will draw them back in. So
maybe
I don't know. I mean, it's perfectly fine. I think the art is also just fine. Like, I didn't really particularly love it. It doesn't really do anything too egregious. It's just a little bit flat and kind of house style looking for my taste. It's it's got that kind of thing where they use the coloring to try and give the faces more definite. Like Mary Marvel, for example, has got like this sort of the rosy red cheeks to try and give her face some more definition, but it just kind of feels a little bit more simplistic to me in a way that isn't completely working. Again, it's not bad by any means. Like, I don't think there's anything here that I would class as bad for the most part. Just really not to my taste. So yeah, I mean, I'd probably give it like a 6, maybe a 6.5 at a push. Not quite calling it good, but certainly nothing that I had a terrible time with either. But I think it's also clear though I don't have that much to say on anything that adds to the story. Like, it's very much like, okay, they're going to have an Amazo track down a hero, fight them. Maybe there'll be a little snippet by the end that maybe adds something to the overall story. But there's not, like, last week me and Matt talked about issue 1 for like 40 minutes of the event. There was a lot of meat in there. A lot of talk about
fluffy by comparison.
Yeah, a lot of talk about where it's going, all the things that it's introduced. Here, it just kind of feels like, okay, this is side content that is very skippable. So do with that what you will, but we can move on.